Hello and welcome. This is View from the Top. Thanks for joining us. The coronavirus has changed the world, the way we live, work and play. And although the crisis is taking a terrible toll, some predict it will bring about far-reaching changes that will benefit humanity. It has already made us more resourceful as we work out ways to get by, and more imaginative as we have to abandon old habits. We've had a chance to think more deeply and have rediscovered the importance of caring for others. On the flip side, enforced social distancing has increased loneliness and abuse, and we have already seen a rise in nationalistic xenophobia, with distrust of foreigners growing swiftly. Now, what do we know? The pandemic has resulted in governments playing a bigger part in our lives. Enforced measures such as lockdowns and so-called palliative measures like food distribution, some say, could pave the way for a more compassionate society in which there is greater state intervention to look after the vulnerable. So what do we not know? We don't know whether the crisis will result in temporary changes or permanent ones. At present, there's a spirit of generosity, companies and individuals donating large sums to relief efforts, with people volunteering to help, and artists, for example, making concerts available online for free. Will all that last, though, when businesses try to make up for the money they are now losing? As emergency measures are eased, as society begins to look beyond the crisis, and as the world tries to get back a semblance of normality, what do we expect in a post-COVID-19 future? In a series of webinars, Professor Konyin Ajayi and the Emmanuel Chapel, at which he is chaplain, have been speaking to policymakers on these and more. And Professor Konyin Ajayi joins me on View from the Top today. Thank you, Prof, for joining us. As I said, Prof is chaplain at the Emmanuel Chapel, Banana Island, but his day job is at Olaniwun Ajayi, where he's a senior partner. Here are a few more things I'd like you to know about my guest before our conversation. Professor Konyin Ajayi, thank you for joining us.
Modely, thank you very much for having me.
What have been your reflections on the impact this pandemic has had on our country? What has this taught you about our priorities in life? What really matters in life at the moment, do you think?
Well, I think what the pandemic has taught us, and including me, is the words of wisdom that life is vanity, and just vanity upon vanity. Because for a long time, many of us couldn't wear things in our wardrobes. We couldn't wear nice shoes and high heel. Many women could not make up. Men could not put on their agbada or put on their suits. People with many cars could not drive their cars. So you begin to wonder, do you really need all these things? Many of us did not travel. We could carry on a lot of things. We didn't have to go to parties. It showed us that a lot of the ceremonies that we have were just, really, really unnecessary. Because in the period, many people got married, people were buried, children were named. And so I think it's also very obvious from the pandemic that our governments have been totally inefficient, ineffective, and ill-prepared to govern. Yes, we knew that we had problems, but when this came, we were just absolutely unprepared. We're just flat-footed, and yes, there was a response from the private sector, but we didn't have the capacity to deploy all those things that came to government. Government could not distribute palliatives. It was just a total mess. But then on the other side, is that it demonstrated to we, the governed, that we had placed too much emphasis on stomach infrastructure. When it's time for elections, we go for the highest bidder, for a pot of porridge, and then sell our lives forever, not just for 4 years.
It was universally assumed that the developing world would bear the brunt of the pandemic. But the one blessing, if we could call it that, is that of this pandemic is that it is countries who can afford it who have borne the brunt of this. Or is it too early to rejoice? I know the pandemic is not over, but it would seem to be African countries and the poorer countries seem to be getting by.
I would warn that, yes, the grace of God abounds for us. Has been so merciful and compassionate. We have only seen a mild form of COVID-19, and we have not seen an exponential growth of COVID-19 in this continent. This is in spite of the fact that we're not testing enough, and many people believe that we're terribly underreporting. So, when we look at the landscape, and so say, yes, God has been merciful. The strain we have is not bad. The mortality rate is not high. The growth is not bad. But then we have to be careful. We have the same climatic conditions as Brazil. They have very poor people as we do, and they have very, very rich people as we do. And what is it that we see now? So, as in Nigeria, the figures were very low, and then there was a spike. And what do we see now? Within a very short period of time, within 2 weeks, Brazil overtook many, many countries. And very soon, it probably will have the second highest rate of death and numbers of dead people in the world. Now, that is what we have to be careful of.
To stop carrying on like there's no problem.
We need to stop carrying on as if there's no problem. And I think the thing about public health, as Fauci was saying yesterday, is that it's not that we need to lock down the economy forever because we have to leave. It is how responsibly we behave. So there must be a behavioral change in us as a people.
But why do you think government is not communicating this? Why are they, it looks like it's just being glossed over. They just, you have to be responsible, but nobody is conveying the fact that, this can be more serious than it is. And I have a feeling that this has been sacrificed on the altar of expediency. We just have to get the economy going.
Yes. It seems to me, and I've said this before, that our president seems to be a general missing in action. The Speaker of the House of Representatives at the 7th Emmanuel Chapel webinar said, "We're at war." With him on that panel was Major General Rabo, who is a highly decorated commander. He was in the northeast facing Boko Haram. He's head of the task force, military task force on COVID-19. He also agreed, and they talked of biosecurity. And so today, the commander-in-chief of this army should be our head of state, but we haven't seen him. We haven't seen him rise to the pulpit to tell us that, my people, you have to do this. And except we hear from him and get the right signal. So it's a pity that we're playing politics with COVID-19. I think a lot of us think is a stigma to have COVID-19. And I think some governments think is a stigma for their states to be said to have COVID-19. I think it's just totally irresponsible. And I just cannot believe what some of our governors are doing. They should be the ones driving the message. The way the governor of Kaduna State is doing very, very commendably and responsibly, that you have to take care of yourself. Your faith and your fate is in your hands. And this is the message that must go out.
I'm beginning to think that governors such as those you have mentioned just think that the most important thing right now is for the economy to function again. Do they have a point?
Yes, the economy must function. But the economy would only function if there are healthy people. Now, I think these governors should be shown the statistics of Nigeria in 1918 and 1919, when 2.3% of the people in northern Nigeria died of the Spanish flu, and 2.5% of the people in southern Nigeria died of Spanish flu. If you just Google it, it's out there. The exact number of people that died. So we must know that if we have this COVID-19 still lurking around us, there are many people that are scared. When people are scared, they don't invest. When people are scared, they don't consume. So what's the economy? Economy is about consumption and investment. So if people are scared to consume and are scared to invest, then what are they talking about?
How do we mitigate the effects of this pandemic on the economy?
We had a webinar, a night webinar, and it was on these two things, mitigation and recovery. And we had, an interesting panel of experts in that field who spoke a lot about the things we could do. And part of the things they spoke about is stimulus, enabling environment, looking at fiscal policy. In other words, what do we do about the taxes? What do we do about a foreign exchange? But more importantly is prioritization. This point was made by His Royal Highness Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, the last emir of Kano Emirate.
Can government afford the debt that's piling up in order to save the economy?
The ratio of our debt to our expenditure is alarmingly high. But is it a problem? No. If you borrow money, every capitalist will tell you this. You use other people's money to make money. If you borrow money and you use it responsibly, it is fine. But what we have is that we're borrowing money to pay salaries. Now that cannot make sense. That just cannot make sense. So rather than borrow money to pay salaries, why don't we rationalize the civil service, look at the public service, look at what is spent not on salaries, but on emoluments that are in multiples of the salaries. We look at those things and you find that if they borrowed money to, for instance, just borrow money and complete Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, according to experts, will pay for itself in 3 to 5 years. So we'll be okay. If they build another bridge, if you build 4 bridges around Lagos, it will pay for itself. So if government borrow, I don't have a problem with borrowing money. It's part of stimulus that governments are doing the world over. But it's how we use the money is the question.
Some say that one of the likely consequences of this is that globalization could be reversed as countries wake up to the importance of being able to supply things for themselves. How can Nigeria seize the moment?
The president says we should be the manufacturing capital of the world, and we should be. We've got the people. But the question is, do we have enough skilled people? One. Number two, do we have the discipline? If you speak to people in the construction industry, they will tell you that the average Nigerian construction worker would get to site slightly late. He gets to site, takes a nap, works for 2 or 3 hours, takes a break, has lunch, takes a nap, does 2 or 3 hours and is closed. And it's contemporary from neighboring countries and abroad work flat out, and they are much more effective. So one is skill, the other is discipline. Now, so if we're more disciplined and we begin to look at retraining our people, we can be the manufacturing capital of the world. There's no reason why not. And we don't even need to be manufacturing capital of the world. Look at Aliko Dangote. So he's building this humongous complex, refinery, fertilizer plant, and all that. It's enough. The Nigerian market is enough to take all that he's doing. And then he can export. So even if we didn't want to supply the world, there's enough for us to supply ourselves. And it's important that we satisfy the local market, because that is what makes the economy grow, that we have a consuming society. So can we do this? Yes, we can. But government needs to take its knees off the neck of business.
One other thing that seems to be an issue right now is the countries are becoming more inward-looking. Many have closed their borders for obvious reasons. They're becoming more insular. Do you think that this would increasingly be the case in a post-COVID world? How can we push for more countries to come together?
Truth of the matter is that globalization has done a lot to help the world. And in as much as there have been flexing of muscles by some powers, truth is that ultimately we would still need each other, because we're a community of people. So what is it that we can do? Borders will be open eventually, and it now becomes, for us, especially in Nigeria, whether we can be the central hub for business in the continent. And we ought to be, but we're not. We're not, again, because I say government has its knee on our throat. And government has to just do something about this. We're great people, we're very entrepreneurial, and we'll do a lot of good if we're left alone by government. We do well abroad. There are Nigerians everywhere doing good business. So it means that there's a lot of opportunity for us. But we need to get government off our backs. And until that happens, I'm afraid that not much will take place.
You know, people say that free market needs to be fixed. But you know, some say that the lesson of this crisis is not that free market needs to be fixed. It is that it's still the best tool for delivering prosperity. They say we should stop obsessing about what kind of capitalism we want to have after the crisis, and be grateful for that we have it at all. What do you say?
I think what COVID-19 has demonstrated is the power of the private sector. So, Lagos State is the 5th largest economy in Africa, is a hub of enterprise in Nigeria. Most of the hospital beds for COVID-19 in Lagos today was built by the private sector. Most of the beds for COVID-19 in Nigeria today was built by the private sector. An incredible amount of money has been spent by the private sector and some religious organizations on providing palliative for the people. So you begin to see the importance of the private sector and the importance of markets. What is evident is that our governments have shown that they're incapable of engaging in the market. Now, in some places, governments are able to do so. But in our case, we are unable to do so. And in those places where they have done so, it only was for a short while, because after some time, government wasn't able to carry the load. So, the truth of the matter is that we must allow the private sector to continue to play its role.
You talked about the role of the private sector in all of this just now. I think the community spirit has been really remarkable, but could they have done more?
Yes. So, two things. Well, first of all, I think government hasn't allowed the private sector to open its wallet before now, because the band for treating donations as tax exempt is very, very narrow under our laws. So, you ask yourself, well, okay, so I made 15 naira. I don't mind to give 25 to charity or to different causes. But the government says, you know what, that 25 naira, I'm going to tax it. So government will not tax it. For instance, with respect to religious institutions, if you give it to one body for Christianity, for instance. So if you give 20 million or 30 million or 1 billion naira to the Catholic Church to build a hospital or to build a school, you will be taxed that money. So, first of all, is that government didn't give us enough space to play. Secondly, is that government, especially this government, has been very aggressive against, it seems to me, the few that even pay taxes. And the strong arm tactics that have been used seems to have been a disincentive. The lesson for us in the private sector is this: we should have spent that money before now. If we had spent the money before now in building the hospital for government, in providing logistics for palliatives, in providing assistance with social security, we probably would have spent half of what we spent when this crisis arose.
What I hear you say is that we should have done more before now. History also shows that some crises lead to improved equality and access to food, to everything, and healthcare, for example. Is a better society likely to emerge from this?
I believe that a better society should emerge, but better not in terms of social security. We've always had that amongst us. We always take care of family and friends and people. When people approach us in Nigeria generally, we rise to the occasion, even for people you don't know. So the improvement I hope we see is in civic engagement. I would like us as a people to move away totally from stomach infrastructure, and it cannot be overemphasized. If we had insisted on the right types of governance, we would have had better health infrastructure. Our behavior pattern will be different because we would have been better educated, we would have been better disciplined. Our ability to distribute things would have been better. If government had good census and had digitized the economy better, and we all had national identification numbers, it would have been easy for government to send all of us 20 naira or 50 naira or 100 naira. But we didn't do these things. So I hope that we will, as a people, now task all the people we bring into government, task and challenge public officials that seek to make life difficult for us. And if we all rise to do it, I mean, who would have thought that a small city in America, in the Midwest, would have councillors vote to disband the police force? But it has happened. And we need to be able to challenge the Nigerian police that behaves in worse ways with us, to challenge law enforcement officers.
There's this belief that catastrophes help to concentrate the minds of people, of the electorate, such as your suggestion. But there are fears that maybe this has made people even less receptive of a vision of change, and when all they care about right now is survival, physical survival, economic survival.
This is a matter of history and political science and reading what has happened over the ages. So we when we face crisis, and also medicine, is fear or fight is what we do. It seems, and we fight at times after we have come up with fear and we decided, it's time to stop. And I think it is time to stop. Yes, we're all gripped with fear, but the fear must be such as to bring up within us that anger that will bring about demonstration, justify conduct that will lead to change. And after that, we can talk of reconciliation. Except we demonstrate, we're not going to have any change. Now, what we must be careful of is this. If this does not happen by peaceful demonstration and peaceful change, we may have a situation that we cannot control. And that is what we must avoid. Because every human being and every society has an elastic band. At a point it will break. So our politicians shouldn't think that, well, yeah, it seems that people are so concerned about survival now, about the food on the table. They're not concerned about the underlying problems that we had. Because beneath COVID-19 was a serious economic problem. Our economy was already in a tailspin. COVID-19 just made it a lot worse. We're already in a pit. COVID-19 just dug the pit deeper and wider. But it wasn't as if COVID-19 came as a bomb that created a crater. We had a crater in society because a lot of governments were failing. You have governments that relied nearly 100% on federally generated revenue. And you ask yourself, so why are you governor when you cannot generate anything? So we have to look at these things from that perspective. And I think we ourselves as a people, and especially the middle class, must begin to see that it shouldn't look at the super affluent, the decadent of society that don't care. Neither should they be unconcerned about the very poor. It is the middle class that is the engine of society that must make sure that things are brought into proper order and we get back on the track to recovery. Because if they do not, they will be the ones that will suffer most. Those people at the top will escape and get away. Those people at the bottom are on the ground and need fear no fall.
Professor Konyin Ajayi, we thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And we thank you for watching. Please join us next time when the program comes around. But between now and then, do tweet me your thoughts on my conversation with Professor Konyin Ajayi. Thanks again for watching, and bye for now.